Okay, so we are on page 158, um, and we're in the middle of the discussion of the different types of situations God places a person in regards to their relationships with others. And that each one that we find ourselves in, there is a way to look at our situation always from the lens of God, that God put me in this situation. And then the question is, how should I look at it? And what does God want me to do in this current situation? So we discussed how some people find themselves in this situation where they are alone. They're not in relationship. They're not in a situation where they're in relationships with people, which is not. I don't think that's a common scenario. We discussed how a person should look at the benefits of being alone and not being disturbed by other things, which gives them opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have. And then we discussed most recently when you're in a relationship, the normal relationships of family and friends, and how we should look at our family and friends, and what our duties are, what our responsibilities are towards them, and to fulfill those responsibilities towards them. And now we're up to people helping people, which may be the most challenging part of relationships, and that is dealing with people who are not family and friends. Well, sometimes family and friends can be very challenging, as we know. And likewise, it can be very challenging to deal with all different types of other people that show up in our life. And that's what we're going to be discussing. Um, Page 158. So, however, the manner with which to have bitachon, to have trust in God regarding the matters that pertain to someone who is of a superior or subordinate class of people. The proper way to conduct himself with them is as follows. So that's often when we are encountering someone else in society. Often they will be either a superior or a subordinate. Not always, but it could be a boss or someone who's a superior in some um, relationship, or a subordinate, someone who is a subordinate to us. So when the need arises for a person to make a request of either his superior or his subordinate, he should rely on God to deliver his request and consider those people of whom he made the request to be merely the messenger whom God will use to complete his request. Very, very simple example. This happens all the time. You go to someone for a service. I don't know if you'd call them a superior or a subordinate. You're going to someone, you're relying on them to get something done for you. It can be your mechanic, it can be someone to fix something, it can be someone who you're getting help from, whatever it may be. And they, for whatever reason, they don't pull through. It doesn't happen, right? Or they were supposed to have it ready today, and it's going to be ready in a week, which could be very disappointing. So when we go to another person, that disappointment only comes from the fact that we actually rely on them to perform whatever we need done. And we believe that it is dependent on, it's in their hands. Whatever they choose to do is what's going to happen. So he's coming to tell us that a person who trusts in God does not rely on the person, but relies on God. And that the person is merely the messenger of God. Now, there's a critical difference between relying on the person and relying on God. Because when we are relying on God, then we are clear that if God wants this done for me at a certain time, it will be done for me through this person, or maybe God will find another way to do it, right? But this person does not control the outcome of what I'm going to ultimately have. This is the clear distinction here, and this is a mind shift, because it seems so clear in the physical world that when I drop off my computer to this, to the computer repairman, whoever that guy is, and to fix it, and he tells me, "Oh, I got busy and I couldn't do it today," that I'm very upset at him. Why didn't you make me a priority? When I am clear that if this is going to be done today, it's going to be done. If God wants this done today, that I should have this done today, I'm going to have it done. If I'm clear that that is the truth, and God will have it done. Now, this person, of course, does have free choice, But one way or another, if God wants it done for me, it's going to be done today. However, that's going to play itself out. So the moment we do this, our interaction with other people changes drastically. Of course, this doesn't happen like you just shift and now everything changes. But like I always say, it's a continuum. However, the more we are aware of this truth, the more our relationships improve drastically because we are not uh, we're not we don't get upset at other people. We don't blame them. We also, by the way, don't overly celebrate them for the good that they have done for us. Interesting thing. So there's an equilibrium that exists when a person actually trusts in God. And that is that everything is appropriate. You have an appropriate response to the person. This is just like a person who chooses working the land and sowing it to be the means of his livelihood. In which case, if the Creator wishes that he be sustained by it, then the seed will sprout forth and be fruitful and multiply. Nevertheless, it is obvious that he shouldn't give thanks to the earth for this. Do you go hugging and kissing the ground? Thank you for doing such a wonderful job. Rather, thanks are owed to the Creator alone. If, however, God does not wish to sustain him from it, then the earth will not sprout forth any vegetation. So as the person can do all of his work, and it's not going to help. You may be aware of the fact that we're in a sort of a drought period here now. There has been very, very little rain. The only reason why I know this is because I asked a lawn guy who treats the mikveh lawn to plant some seeds, some grass seeds, so that it fills in certain areas. And we happen to have a sprinkler system that we got on advice from a landscaper. But without that, right, like my lawn, next time you're near the mikvah, you just look at the two lawns, you'll see a very big contrast between the two. And that's because my lawn doesn't have rain. And all of the seeds that we put down did not really help that much because it just didn't get rain. And that is up to God. So a farmer is very clear that they are very dependent on the blessings of God. The truth is that we are all equally dependent on the blessings of God in everything that we have going on in life. It's just that it seems sometimes that it has more to do with our effort and not with God. And that is the misconception where we begin to fall out of trust in God. And that's exactly the point that he's making over here. And especially when we are relying on another person, because we look at the other person as a person who has the power to provide us with what we want from them and expect from them. And while they do have the choice, ultimately, if God wants us to have it, we will. And if God doesn't want to, no matter how much they're going to choose to, they won't be able to. If, however, God does not wish to sustain him from the earth, then the earth will not sprout forth any vegetation. Alternatively, it will sprout forth vegetation, but something adverse will happen to it. In both of these cases, it's obvious that the earth is not to blame. That's one thing that's clear. And so in some respect, we have to look at another person the same way as we look at land, as earth. Now, the person themselves is given free choice, and that's something between them and God. But the results that we receive in life, whether it's from the ground or whether it's from another person, is ultimately determined by what God wants us to receive. That's the key point over here. That's the mind shift that we have to continuously remind ourselves of. We can go to the best doctor in the world, and this doctor is truly the best in their field, and they are very skilled, and they have great experience, and they have tremendous success. However, their ability to perform for us and to produce a certain result, they will perform excellent with their integrity of being an excellent doctor. But their performing excellent will not guarantee a good result. Why? Because the result is in God's hands. This is the reason why I always say that we work in the efforts department and God works in the results department. It's a good thing to always remember. Results are not in our control. They are in God's control. So we say, God, I went to the best doctor I could because you tell us, you have instructed us to always find the best means in nature, in the natural order of things, to produce good results. So I did my part, and God, I pray to you that in fact you provide me with excellent results. That's the equation with everything that we do. And by the way, this is a key point also, and this is also why it gets confusing, is that on one hand, God tells us that you must do your best in the natural order of things. So we do have to take care of our health, and we do have to go to the best doctor, and we do have to have the best marketing campaign, and we do have to do our best in making the sale. And at the same time, with all of that effort that we're putting into it, we have to remember that it's not this that makes the result. It's just us doing what our responsibility is, and only God provides the result. We're on page 158, on the very bottom of the page, where it says, when a person makes a request of someone, he should not rely on that person. This is really hard to do, by the way. We're so entrenched in relying on the other person. It's really hard. However, it's very doable, and it's a game changer, complete game changer. So he should not rely on that person. Rather, he should rely on God alone and realize that God is the true source of everything. God's the source of everything. Furthermore, since God is the true source of everything, it follows that he should not put any more hope in a person who is more capable of fulfilling his request than one who is less capable. I want to give you an example that I've experienced numerous times. I've experienced through others. And that is that, God forbid, someone that has an illness and they are, let's say they're stuck somewhere, so they don't have the ideal choices that they would like to have of doctors, of hospitals, of whatever resources, right? Or they are, but for whatever reason, they got the other doctor, they didn't get this doctor, whatever it may be, and things don't work out. The doctor does what they could. There's a surgery, a critical surgery, right? And things don't work out. The person passes away. And the relative lives with an anger to this doctor and a blame on this doctor. And if only, there are a whole bunch of if onlys. If only this hospital, if only this doctor, if only this, whatever, right? And the reality is that if we are providing the very best that we can provide, which I would say in a general sense, I can't say that we always do, but in a general sense, like especially with medicine, we obviously are trying to get the best person that's available, right? Our options may be limited. Why are our options limited? Because God has limited them. That's why they're limited. This happens in this place, or that doctor is not available because God sets it up that way, right? So it's not as if it's our choice. So we have to see all of this clearly, that this is all God playing out. And if the result is not what we wanted, it may be very painful. It may be very tragic. We may be very upset at God, and that's fine. Be upset at God. Don't be upset at the doctor. Obviously, if there's negligence, that's a separate story, right? But we're not talking about where there's negligence. We're talking about the doctor did their best. You think if only I had another doctor, they know how to do it even better, and everything would have been fine. That is a misnomer. And that is a lack of trust in Hashem. So that's why he says it follows that he should not put any more hope in a person who's more capable than someone who's less capable. At the end of the day, God is going to give you the result that God intends for you to have. This is very powerful. Then page 159, top of the page. Or actually, let's just do the bottom line on the bottom of page 158. When you need to make a request, rely on God to deliver it. Consider those people of whom you made the request to be merely the messenger whom God will use to complete your request. The way you can test yourself, I find it very important to test ourselves, because we like to fool ourselves into convincing ourselves that we have this super high level of faith, which is not always the case. And it's important for us to know where we stand, because this way we can improve. So, and that is how we feel about the messenger when we don't get a result that we want, right? If we're upset at the messenger, then we know that we believe in the messenger more than we believe in God. If we're upset at God, we know we realize this is from God, and that's appropriate. That's a proper relationship to have. Page 159. Similarly, when he requests an object from one of these people, who is either above him or below him, he should consider the weak person and the strong person as equally able to perform his request, not placing any more trust in the stronger person. He should rely on God, blessed be he, that his request be fulfilled. If ultimately the person that he is available to do this is only the weaker person, like the example of the doctors I just gave, the surgeons or whatever it may be, right? We should know that God is behind whatever's going to happen. So if we have the blessing of God, God will send the blessing through whoever the agent ultimately is. If his request is fulfilled by one of the people, then who should he thank? If the request is fulfilled and the person gets the job done, he should thank the Creator, blessed be he, who fulfilled his wishes. Results, you always thank God. Why? Because God produces results. No one else can produce results for you. Not you and not anyone else. He should also thank the person through whom the favor was done. You should also thank the person, and this is a key point, but for a different reason than we often do. For his good-heartedness and for the fact that the Creator brought his benefits through him. God uses messengers, and people make choices with their free will to be the messenger of God. You know, you could go to multiple friends to ask for a favor, and only one of them chooses to be the messenger. What's the result? The result is that you get something done that you needed done. Now, who produced that result? God produced the result, right? It's just a matter of through whom God will produce the result. So we thank God first and foremost. However, we thank the friend for choosing to be the messenger through which God's result was going to go through. Not every friend will choose to be that messenger, right? You know, this is very, very important. So we have to appreciate that if someone spent, I don't know how many years it is, it's probably 12 years and I don't know, residency and whatever it is, the amount of effort that goes into being a doctor, this person put in so that they are now available to be my messenger. I owe them a big thank you for that. That's a huge thank you. I don't think I would have been, I'd be able to survive that many years in medical school, right? So that's tremendous. Big thank you. But we have to be clear about what the thank you is, right? And sometimes you may, depending on the person, you may even be able to say, you know, maybe it's easier when you come with the title of a rabbi, it's easier to say that because they understand where you're coming from. But thank you for being an outstanding messenger of God. I'm so grateful to you. Right? Be careful with that one, though. Make sure the doctor can hear that. He may not appreciate it. So although the person is merely carrying out God's decree, he is to be thanked for two reasons. First, to show appreciation for the person's goodwill. And second, because he deserves credit for the merit of being the intermediary whom God used in order to give him the good. What does it mean that he had the merit of being God's intermediary to answer the person's request? So he explains that for it is well known that generally speaking, the Creator does not cause good to come to other people except through the righteous. And only rarely does he cause loss through them. Okay, this is another very beautiful idea he's going to explain. He's explaining something a little bit beyond what I just explained. He's going to take this a little bit deeper now. He's saying this, in addition to the fact that the messenger chose to be the messenger, there's something else here also. When there's a good outcome, God specifically, there's a very powerful phrase. I'm going to say it in Hebrew because it carries emotion for me. But the Hebrew phrase is megalgalin zchus al yedei zakai, which means that God sends meritorious results through a meritorious person. That means that good people, God sends good results to others through good people. Because they are a righteous, we'll say, I'm going to use the word righteous, I don't mean righteous in an absolute term, but because they're a good person, they're a righteous person, God says that righteous things will happen through you. So we also have to thank them for being a righteous person through which God sends righteous things. That's the point that he's making. Now, by the way, the Talmud also says the opposite. That God sends negative things through negative people. It's sort of like a self-perpetuating cycle. You may have heard of the idea of a teaching from the Mishnah that says that mitzvah, when a person does a mitzvah, goreres mitzvah, it automatically propels the person to the opportunity of another mitzvah. And it says avera, when someone does a sin, something against the will of God, it automatically propels them in the direction of another opportunity to do something against the will of God. It's sort of like a mode. We put ourselves in a certain mode, and the mode that we put ourselves in actually is self-generating. And so it feeds on itself. As our sages of blessed memory say, merit is brought about by means of a person who's meritorious. And here's the other one. And the liability is brought about by means of a person who's liable. That's why, by the way, I'll say, even though this is very painful to think about, but sometimes you say something, a person says something to someone, and they get hurt, and you had no intention whatsoever to hurt them, right? Maybe you're even complimenting them, but somehow they took it in a way that was hurtful to them, right? So did you do something deliberately to hurt them? No, absolutely not. You really didn't mean it at all. However, the reality is that something negative came about through you, right? So when I experience that, I feel like, true, I didn't mean it, but as we just read, liability is brought about by means of a person who's liable. Why did that person's hurt come about through me? That's not a good sign, right? Without being overly harsh on oneself, but there's something to pay attention to over there, is what I'm saying. Because now we are a messenger for something which was negative. Similarly, it says in Proverbs, no wrong shall be caused for the righteous. The bottom line, thank a person who does a favor for you. Thank him for his good-heartedness and for the fact that God brought you this benefit through him. It's similar to, sometimes someone, you benefit from somebody, but they really didn't go out of their way in any way to benefit you. You're just a recipient of a broader thing the person was doing, and you're there, so you're a recipient of it. I'm trying to think of an example, but you cook. Thanksgiving is coming up. I'd rather use Shabbos dinner, but we could use either one of the two, right? Like sometimes at the end of services here in synagogue on Friday night, so I see someone that and I say, why don't you come over to my home for Shabbos dinner? Like right there on the spot, right? Okay, so clearly the whole Shabbos dinner is cooked already, right? Clearly, we're not doing anything. We're not making an extra effort for him, right? He's just coming over. I mean, the difference between 40 people and 41 people is always enough food, right? So on one hand, the person can think, no, they didn't make any effort for me, right? It's not like they cooked extra food for me. Why do I have to be so thankful to them for, right? But the reality ultimately is that something good came about through them for you. That's the key. That's the key. It's not about how much effort they did make or didn't make. It's that this person is an agent of God that is bringing good to you. That's where the thanks comes from. Right? Let me use another example, actually. Let's say someone needs a loan. Okay, you need a loan. And there's going to be a little bit that, let me think for a second how we could... I'm sorry, you're looking for some business. You need business. You need to make a living and you're struggling, right? And someone gives you an opportunity to do work for them. Okay? Now, the work you're doing for them is very valuable for them, and their business is benefiting greatly from it. At the same time, you're benefiting because you have a job, right? So you can say, what? The guy's not doing me any favor. I'm good at this. He hired me. He should be thankful to me. That's true. He should be thankful to you. And it's also true that you should be thankful to him, because it's through him that you have a job. So it's not so much the effort the person is making, is that the person is a messenger of God to serve good to you, which is not only a reason to be thankful to him, but also a statement about him that God is performing goodness through a meritorious person, through, as they translated here, merit is brought about by means of a meritorious person. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to the top of page 160. The simple meaning of the verse is that no wrong will happen to the righteous. However, it is understood here to mean that no wrong shall be caused by the righteous. Since good only comes through the righteous, it makes sense for the recipient to thank his benefactor, because it is only due to his righteousness that he was deserving of being his benefactor. So sometimes, by the way, a friend comes to us and asks us for help with something. Why are they coming to us and asking us? Well, they have 10 friends to ask. Why do they come to me? Sometimes you wonder that, right? Why are you coming to me? Right? And sometimes I wish you were, I wish they would have gone to someone else, right? However, you know why they're coming to you? In part, they're coming to you because God is sending merit to you because you're a meritorious person, and He's giving you an opportunity to do something beautiful. But when we don't have that perspective, we push it away. You know, hey, why don't you ask them? Why don't you ask them? And what we're doing is we're pushing away this opportunity that God is sending to us to be the meritorious one to provide something good for this person. So until now, we discussed what happens if the person ends up completing his request. The author now discusses the proper approach in the case where his request was not fulfilled. Because now he's talking, I already addressed this a little bit, but what happens when you go to the person and you ask them to do something and they make the effort to produce a result, but they don't control the result. And God decides that there's no result, that you're not going to get the result that you want. So if his request was not fulfilled by the people he turned to, he should not blame them, nor should he blame it on the lack of effort on their part. You know, sometimes we say, oh, they didn't try hard enough. I wish they cared more. No, they did try, and they do care. Instead, he should thank God who chose to withhold his request from him for his own good. Two things he's saying here, two important things. Saying number one is know that the request is being withheld by God. So as hard as the person is going to try, it's not going to change anything. Number two, God only does good. This is a tough one to chew. We've discussed this from different angles. God only does good. So if God only does good, what does that mean? That if God is withholding this from me, He's holding it from me for my good. That's why He's withholding it from me. I don't know what that good is. Sure, it doesn't seem like it's good, but God's withholding it from me for my good. This getting into this mindset is really, really powerful, by the way. This is a major liberation. To know that everything is from God, and then to know that everything from God is good. It may not be good in the present moment, in the revealed state, but ultimately it's for my good. And he should praise the people of whom he made the request based on his knowledge of their efforts that they invested to fulfill his request, even though it did not materialize according to his wishes or the wishes of the people who wanted to help him. Now, here's the thing. When someone makes an effort on your behalf and you don't get the results that you want, so decent people thank them. You know they made an effort and you thank them. But there are two ways of thanking someone. There's thanking someone when they pulled through in our belief, right? And they really got it done, or when they put an effort that they didn't produce. But imagine thanking someone for making the effort as if the results were there. Because their efforts are regardless. It's the same. Whether the results showed up or not, this person deserves the same thanks. The thanks doesn't change, right? Why would the thanks change if there are different results? Unless you believe, right? Unless we believe that the results are in their hands. Then we give them a bigger thanks when there are better results. No, you tell them genuinely, I appreciate everything you did 100%. Results, that's God's business. I'll take it up with him. I'm davening in mincha soon. I'll deal with him soon, right? But you, unbelievable. You're a true friend. Thank you. This is how a person should conduct himself with his friends and acquaintances, as well as with those with whom he does business and with his servants and partners. Hey, this was a different era when there were servants. If someone asks a request of you, similarly, if either a superior or a subordinate of his makes a request of him, he should wholeheartedly make every effort to perform it. But if possible, he should try to complete the request in private, so that he will not become haughty as a result. You see, what happens when we are the provider, when we are the one doing the favor, is very often we feel much better when after we make the effort, we get the result that actually helps them. And we feel bad when they don't get the result that they want. Why do we feel good or feel better or worse based on the result? Because we're taking credit for the result. But if someone's truly trusting in Hashem, then we are letting go of the result. We may feel bad for them that they didn't get the result, that God didn't provide them with the result. But we don't carry blame that they didn't get the result. We don't carry that burden on us. It's a very powerful way of living. Your conscience is clear. My conscience is one thing. Am I bringing everything I have to the table? If the answer is yes, I bring everything to the table, right? I'll feel very good that this person got the result. I'll feel very bad if they didn't get the result. But I'm not attributing credit to myself, where now I feel better about myself because I produced the result. You know how we sometimes talk and say, well, you know why that happened, right? You know who got that done for you, right? All of that is in misalignment. You could say that. You can say you know got that done for you, and then remind yourself and then God, right? I was just the messenger to do the work. I just do God's work. That's all I do. After page 161, after making these efforts, he should rely on God to help him fulfill the person's request. Not only should the person be relying on God, but you should rely on God. You, as the one who's trying to help your friend, should rely on God. If the request ends up being fulfilled through his efforts, because God placed him in the position of being the conduit for the other person's good, he should not attribute his success to himself, and he should not ask for recompense or thanks from the other person. Rather, he should thank God for choosing him to do this good for his friend. We should be grateful to God that God, you gave me the opportunity to be your agent, your messenger, to be able to deliver this goodness to this person. I know you're going to deliver this goodness to this person because they got the goodness. I know that was your intention. Thank you for letting me be the one to deliver it. For me to be a person who is the meritorious, who provides, who has merit, and to provide the meritorious. If, however, he was prevented from fulfilling the request and he was not able to do it, he should not blame himself. He should inform his friend that he was not lazy in his efforts on his behalf, provided that he did, in fact, exert himself and toil on this person's behalf. The only thing you need to ask yourself is, are you genuinely bringing your best to the table? And if you are, you will not take credit for success and you don't blame yourself for failure. By the way, this is the reason why if a if a person takes responsibility, blames themselves for failures in life, they will. I'm sorry. If someone takes credit for their successes in life, then they will also carry the blame for their failures in life. But if a person doesn't take credit for their successes in life, they also won't carry the burden of failures in life because they know that the results are always God's. My job is just to do my best. And decent people generally do their best or close to their best. Of course, we can always put in a little bit more effort, but we do our best. Good, everyone? Okay. Now we're going to get into a, just a second. Okay. Now we're going to be discussing a challenging subject, and that is dealing with enemies. Okay, now when we say enemies here, I don't believe that he's talking about Hamas and Hezbollah at all. He's talking about societal enemies. We develop, unfortunately, in relationships, people who either they consider us to be an enemy or we consider them to be an enemy, which is always unfortunate. And sometimes it's understandable because sometimes people really hurt us and cheat us and take advantage of us. So we have an enemy attitude towards them. He's going to discuss how to deal with that. It's going to be a very high road. But the high road, again, is always the most liberating road, the most beautiful road, and the most, when I say liberating, I mean it's freeing. If you don't want to go through the burden, carry the burdens that we typically carry in life, in unhealthy relationships, you can literally have someone who is your enemy and you can be free, emotionally free from the burden of that enemy. It's all about how you relate to them. For more on relationships, join us tonight at 7:30 p.m. However, with regard to matters pertaining to his enemies, those who covet his possessions and those who seek to do bad to him, he should rely on the Creator, may he be exalted. He should tolerate when they embarrass him and he should not take retribution from them according to their misdeeds. Now he's talking about a very high level, of course. The Talmud says, tzaddikim, righteous people, ne'elavin, they get ashamed, the ein and oven, but they will never shame. That means someone will shame them, but they'll be quiet. Shoymim cherpasum, they will hear their denigration. The einam yeshivim, they won't respond. Can you imagine operating on that level? So someone says something nasty to you, and you hear it, you don't respond. Maybe even you'll smile back at them. I'm sorry you feel that way about me. He should repay them with kindness and do for them any good that he is able to do for them. Can you imagine that? Not only do you not live in reaction to them, but you live in action to the way you want to be with any person. And that is, if there's a way I can be kind to you and help you, I will. He should remember that ultimately any benefit that he receives and all the harm that comes to him is in the hands of the Creator, may he be exalted. It's knowing this person has absolutely no control over me. And they can covet, and they can try and destroy my business, and they can try and do whatever they want to do. They do not have the ability to do that unless that's what God wants me to experience. And if God wants me to experience it, makes no difference if they're my enemy or my friend. It doesn't make any difference. It won't change that. This is advanced stuff, which we're all very capable of. By the way, when I say advanced, I don't want you to think that it's beyond our reach. We had this is part of some of you heard this on Shabbos. I really appreciated this interpretation where Rashi says that hamispalal ba'ad chavero, when someone prays on behalf of their friend, v'hu tzarach la'oso davar, and he needs that very same matter. Hu nenatchila, God will answer you who are praying for your friend for you. There's a beautiful. I can tell you a beautiful story. I don't want to go into the whole story, but I had a rabbi in yeshiva. His name was Rabbi Wahlberg, and he was not blessed with any children. And he was hosting two people in his house. One person, I'm giving you the abbreviated version because from the way I remember it. One person did not have children for a few years. They came to Crown Heights, to Brooklyn, to the Rebbe to ask the Rebbe for a blessing. The Rebbe gave him a blessing, but they still were not having children for a few months. And then they lived in Israel, and they heard the Rebbe in Farbrengen that they were listening to in Israel. Now Israel like 6 or 7 hours ahead. So when the Rebbe would start Farbrengen at 9:30 p.m., right, that would be 4 or 5 a.m. in whatever it is. It would be in the middle of the night in Israel. And a lot of Hasidic Jews, Hasidim would get up and they would listen. They would get in the middle of the night and they would listen to the Farbrengen. He was listening to the Farbrengen, and he heard that the Rebbe said that when you want a blessing, you should pray for your friend who needs the same blessing. So he immediately wrote a letter to the Rebbe. He woke up his wife, which I'm not promoting, but in this case it's okay. And he said, I just heard the Rebbe say this. Maybe this is what we need to do. So they thought about another couple that needed children. They wrote a letter to the Rebbe asking for a blessing for this couple. Now they need children, but they asked for the other couple. And what ended up happening was the other couple had a child, and they had a child before the end of the year. Then they had another, I think, 2 children. Then they had a gap again of no children. They came to Crown Heights again to have children. And he was staying by my rabbi's, my teacher's house, my Talmud teacher's house, Rabbi Wahlberg, who didn't have children also, and staying at the house with another person from Israel, from an area called Beit Shemesh, which I was just at, and who didn't have any children. And he also came to ask the Rebbe for a bracha for children. So this man, visitor number 1, said to visitor number 2, I learned that when you go to the Rebbe to ask for a bracha, ask for someone else who needs a bracha, not for yourself. So both of them decided they're going to go on the line of dollars when the Rebbe gives out dollars. And they're both going to ask the Rebbe for a bracha for their host who doesn't have children, my teacher. So that's what they both did. They both went online. They both want a blessing for children themselves, but what they did was they asked for someone else, for their host. What happened? The first guy from Israel who already had a couple of children, but had a gap, had a child. The guy who didn't have any children from Israel had a child. And my teacher had his first child. That year, had a girl. Amazing story. So just to give you some faith in what the Talmud says. Now, going back to, so Rashi says something else. He says, right, so that's what Rashi says. When you pray on behalf of someone else who needs what you need, God will answer you first. So there's a commentary that explains it slightly differently, that when you pray on behalf of someone else, and you need that person not get the blessing that they want, because if they get that blessing, it'll be a threat to you. See, it's explained a little bit differently now. That what you need is not, you don't need the blessing that they need. You need that they not get the blessing. Because they're getting the blessing will be a threat to you, like your competition. Right? You have competition on the same block. You're going to pray for their success. Listen, I'm not going to stop them from making money, but I'm not going to pray for their success. Right? That's what a normal person would say. So this interpretation says when you pray on behalf of your friend, and you really would need that they shouldn't be successful, but you pray for them anyway, that they should be successful, God will answer you first. That's the ultimate. That's the ultimate. And how does a person do that? When a person is absolutely clear that results are all from God, that's when you do it. When you are clear results are from God, the whole world can have success. Please, everyone should have tremendous success, right? Everyone in my business should have some tremendous success. Get as many clients as you can. It doesn't take away from me. It's like the story of the one of my favorite stories of Rameir Premishlan. I most definitely shared the story in the past. Rameir Premishlan was once approached by the watchmaker in his town of Premishlan. He said, Rebbe, what should I do? The Rebbe says, what's the problem? The problem is that I've been the watchmaker in this town for the last 20 years, and a new watchmaker just moved in, and he opened up shop. It's a small town. I'm going to lose half my livelihood at least. So the Rameir Premishlan said, do you own a horse? So he said, I do. He said, you ever take it to the lake to drink? He said, of course, all the time. He says, did you ever notice what the horse does before it drinks? He says, yes, horses, before they drink, for some reason, they always kick up the mud, the dirt, right around the water before they start drinking. He said, did you ever wonder why horses do that? He says, I never thought about it. I have no idea why they do it. He says, I'll tell you why they do it. Because when the horse lowers his head to drink from the water, you know what the horse sees? Another horse. He says, oy vey, the other horse is going to drink up all my water. So it kicks mud. What happens when water is muddy? There's no reflection. The other horse goes away. And now he can drink quietly. So he says, when someone has a behemoth cup, when someone thinks like a horse, they actually think there's another horse that's going to drink up all their water. But when you know that God's your provider and there's endless water, you don't worry about these things. That's what we're learning. Okay, so and by the way, this is a story. If we think with our animal head, what we call our animal soul, like a human being, if you think like a human being, you'll be very worried. But if you think like a godly being, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. Question is, which reality is reality? That's the question. Which reality is reality? So we want to align with the reality. That's the whole point here. The whole point here is reality is not the way the animal sees it, the way the physical sees it. There's a much deeper, truer reality. And that's our life service, to be aligned with the reality. Okay, so we are on the, where are we at? They were dealing with the enemies, yes. So rather he should repay them with kindness and do for them any good that is able to do. So let's look at the footnote where it says on the bottom of page 161, where it says he should not take retribution from them according to the misdeeds. So there are numerous verses. He's going to this is a philosophical discussion that he's having here, and that is that it seems to be that we see that King David did ask for his enemy. He said prayers for his enemies to fall. So they give a few explanations to understand this. One explanation, it depends on the standing of the enemy. If he's of great sin, then it's permitted to ask for his demise. If not, then the aggrieved person should not pay him back. Rather, he should be kind to him. But the Alter Rebbe says something really beautiful. He writes that even those whom we are told to hate, for they are close to him, and he has rebuked them, they still have not repented of their sins. It is true, the Alter Rebbe says, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe in Tanya, he says this. In chapter 32, one of the most well-known chapters of Tanya, he says there that it is true that we have verses in the Torah that tell us that you should hate someone who is wicked, who is evil. He says it is also true that you have an obligation to love them. You have an equal obligation to love and hate them. How does that work? There's a part of them that you'll love, and there's a part of them that you hate. There's a very important distinction relating to people, by the way. And both the love and the hatred are truthful emotions, because the hatred is on account of the evil within them, while the love is on account of the good that's hidden in them, namely the divine spark within a Jew that animates his divine soul. For this spark of godliness is present even in the most wicked of one's fellow Jews. It is merely hidden. He must also arouse compassion on the divine soul of the sinner, for in the case of the wicked, the spark is in exile within the evil forces that dominate the divine soul, and this compassion will banish his hatred and arouse his love. So there's distinguishing. You probably have heard that you should not tell a child that they are bad, and this is very correct. You can tell them what they did is bad, but don't tell them that they are bad. They are bad is defining them as, classifying them as a bad person. They're not a bad person. They're a good person who sometimes does bad things, as are we all. But there's a very big difference between the two, and that's the point that we're saying over here. So we hate the wickedness, but we don't hate the person. All right, well, let's let's go to the bottom of page 162, where it says, "Do for them any good that he is able to do for them." The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, once said, "It is a distinguishable asset when God grants a person a natural trait and satisfaction in doing a fellow Jew a favor, to the extent that the other becomes more cherished than himself, in the sense that a person can find many reasons to explain why he himself deserves to experience a difficulty. He has sinned, whereas such assumptions about another are unthinkable." There's a way of living. Some people are more naturally disposed to this. There's a way of living where you develop yourself to actually enjoy doing a favor for another person, and always helping another person, never coming up with a reason why they don't deserve it. The only time you find justification for someone not deserving something is for yourself. Because you know yourself and you know you're not perfect, you say, maybe I don't deserve it. But when it comes to another person, you never have that thought. That is the epitome of beauty, of a beautiful person. And the Baal Shem Tov taught, a person must have self-sacrifice to do a favor for another Jew, both in material matters, especially in spiritual matters. That we should have self-sacrifice. That means go to very great lengths, or sacrifice our own self, that we give up of our own for another person, both in material matters and in spiritual matters. A soul descends into this world and lives 70, 80 years only in order to do a favor for a fellow Jew. This is a very famous quote from the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said that a soul is sent here for 70, 80 years just to do a favor. The Rebbe once told this to somebody. The Rebbe once got very upset because some of the Chabad students yelled at someone who had stopped the Rebbe the Rebbe's Hasidim were very careful about the Rebbe's time, and they were very protective of the Rebbe and his time and people bothering the Rebbe, quote unquote, bothering the Rebbe. So if there's someone who stopped the Rebbe when the Rebbe was on the street and spoke to him, which was a little bit out of protocol, right? Sometimes they would, tell the person, "Hey, you're out of protocol," and sometimes they would do it in a very harsh way. So there was a person who was not from the Chabad community, didn't know protocol, but Solomon told him, if you stand outside the Rebbe's house at a certain time when he leaves the house, you can stop him. See, he did. He stopped and asked him for a blessing. And what ended up happening was students came over to him and they yelled at him, and how dare you? Who do you think you are? Whatever. And the Rebbe found out about it because the Rebbe asked the person why he didn't follow up, and he said, the students told me it's not appropriate. So the Rebbe told the students, sent a message to the students, that when the Baal Shem Tov said, a soul comes down to this world for 70 or 80 years just to do one favor for another Jew, who knows if the whole reason why my soul came down to this world was to help this person. And you have the chutzpah to tell him not to speak to me? Right? Those Rebbe's took this very seriously. So it's always something to keep in mind. He should remember that ultimately any benefit he receives. Okay, so I'm back on 1 second. Right. I'm back on top of the page. If they cause him harm. If they cause him harm, let's say this is an enemy that's causing them harm. You're causing you harm. He should think good about them. And he should suspect that it is himself and his previous misdeeds toward God that are the cause of his misfortune. Let me explain this. If someone causes us harm, we should not stand there and let them cause us harm. But he's not discussing that. That's not what he's addressing here. I just want to be clear about that so you understand the distinction. We don't welcome abuse. However, if someone did cause us harm, why did we receive the harm? Now, we're going to look at this from a trust in God perspective. If God did not want me to experience it, I would not have received it. Clearly, God wanted me to experience it, which probably has something to do with some misdeeds or some correction or atonement that I need to receive. And I see it through that, and I don't see it as a blaming them. Their business with the fact that they chose to do something which is clearly negative and clearly wrong and clearly something they should not have done is their business with God. It's not my business. That's their business with God. My business is I'm not here to blame them for what I experienced from it. The outcome of it is that I experienced. The result is all from God. And now I'm not going to put myself in a position where this person can continue to abuse me, of course. I just want to emphasize that. But what I experienced, that is between me and God. What they did is between them and God. He should offer supplications to God and beg him to forgive his sins. If he does this, then his enemies will return to love him. As the wise man King Solomon said, when the Lord accepts a person's ways, he will cause even his enemies to make peace with him. So that's what King Solomon writes. God will ultimately turn your enemies into friends. Some of us have probably experienced that in life, where suddenly, surprisingly, someone who was at odds with us suddenly is being so friendly and so nice. What happened? God turned them into your friend. That's what happened. Let's look on the bottom of the page. If they cause him harm, on page 162. This person is not the one actually injuring him. Rather, it is God who is injuring him. And this person is merely his agent. As it states regarding Shimei, the son of Gera, who cursed King David. So, I was just in Israel. See, So I'll get to the comment in a minute. I was just in Israel. And one of the beautiful things about Israel is that you can actually see biblical stories where they played out right in front of you. So we were at a place called David, the city of David. Some of you may have visited there. It's a fascinating place to visit because there's it's an ongoing archaeological dig where you can literally see the pages of the prophets where it speaks about King David's life right in front of you. They found coins, the names that we have in Tanakh, in the book of prophets of King David's advisors, they found coins with their names on it. So amongst many, many other fascinating things there. So you could see the valley that King David, when King David ran away, because his son, you think you got problems. King David's son was overthrowing him. Didn't last very long, but it seemed like it would. King David was running away. And when he was running away, Shimei, one of the most prominent rabbis of the generation, for whatever reason, was at odds with King David. And from across the valley, Israel's made of hills and valleys all over the place. So across the valley, Shimei, standing on a safe distance, curses King David. Now, when you curse a king, that's an act of rebellion. An act of rebellion to a king, according to Jewish law, gets a death penalty. The king can just off with his head just like that. So, but King David, what did King David say when Shimei was cursing him? So King David said to King David's chief of staff, his general, wanted to kill him. So I'm going to go kill him. So he said, Avishai asked King David why he allowed him to curse and then asked for permission to execute Shimei. As punishment for his rebellious insult, King David replied, let him curse because the Lord has said to him, curse David. What is King David saying? That God told him to curse me? He chose to curse me. What King David was saying is that if this guy cursed me, and God's giving him a life to live, enabling this, right? And giving him the ability to do this. And he's doing this, God wants me to experience this. So leave him for now. Just leave him. God wants me to experience this. It's from God. You see how King David saw things, right? You know how kings and rulers are, right? Any little thing sets them off, and they don't, especially people who have all power, which a king did, right? But King David saw this truly from God. Now, I just want you to know that ultimately King David had Shimei punished. Before he passed away, he told his son Solomon, who would succeed him, to punish him because he deserved the punishment. And the king can't have people rebelling openly and not being responded to. But the immediate response King David wanted to have is one from the perspective of, this is from God. I don't want to create confusion here. I want clarity in me knowing that this is from God. Let me just finish this note. Since God creates the world anew at every single moment, and he's the source of every single creation, it behooves us to conclude that when a person speaks, and in this case, the words of curse uttered by Shimei, it is by the will of God. Similarly, when a person is injured by another, that act was sustained by God and by his will. Okay. So we have a very big question here. So a question was sent. Child abuse cannot be related to anything the child did. That is correct. The child did not cause anything for that to be done, and therefore it's definitely not because of any sins or wrongdoing, without a question. I agree with that 100%. I'm not sure if you're insinuating more, and if you are, then you can write that. I'm not going to assume that. There are times that God puts people through things for many different reasons that we will or won't know. One of the ways that we do know is what we get out of it. If we have the perspective that every experience that God puts me through is, again, and now this is heavy. We're talking about something very heavy now, okay? And I'm talking about it. I'm talking about it in an abstract way. That means that if this is personal to someone, I'm not talking to you about this. And if you're in pain from it, I leave full space for that, because how that's dealt with practically in reality it's dealt with. But philosophically, I'm talking about, right? And philosophical and emotional are two different worlds. But philosophically, now, if we can get the philosophical to guide our emotion over time, that could be very productive. But I don't expect that from anybody, because I don't have that expectation. So if someone's in pain and they're suffering every single day because of such an event, I feel terrible that they had that event. And all I can say is my heart goes out to them. From a philosophical point of view, everything that goes right back to everything we said in the class, nothing changes. Everything that God puts us through is for our good. It's hard to imagine that. I know, and I can bring up horrific scenarios. Coming back from Israel, I can bring up a lot of horrific scenarios, right? Is for our good, and for the purpose God put us in this world. And hopefully we come to seeing that. And sometimes we don't. And sometimes we suffer. We never get to find the strength of seeing it any differently than I am a victim of this horrific event. And if that's the person's, it's a tragedy. It's tragic, and I feel terrible for the person. But I also totally understand that. Imagine, right? I'm going to go back to what I spoke about on Shabbos. Imagine a soldier who lost both of his legs, right? His whole life is, I mean, how do you wake up from a coma and find out that you don't have legs, and then and live a normal sane life? How do you do that? Now there is perspective, and we can talk about it philosophically. I would never sit in front of a soldier and tell him, everything from God is for the good, and you have to see it that way. That would be the most cruel thing to do, right? The most beautiful thing to do is just to be with them to the fullest extent that we can in their pain and their suffering. It's their business how to deal with it. It's not my business. I can't deal with them, their life for them. I can only deal with my life for me. The best thing I can do is make sure that in my life, everything I experience is from the right perspective, so I can be an example to other people who choose to see what see me and see me as an example. So this is a very critical thing when it comes to any type of tragedy or pain or abuse or whatever it may be, is that everything we're learning here is for us. It's for me. It's only for one person, for you. It's not to go preach to other people. And I'm going to tell you two things. Let me tell you two things. One thing is, people who preach to other people very often are people who don't apply it to themselves, which is why they keep themselves busy preaching it to others. Their relationship with this and their feeling of elevation comes from the fact that they preach it, right? Which is why we always speak about practicing what you preach. And I would say practice and don't preach, right? So that's firstly. Everything we're learning is for us. And if we're having a philosophical conversation which is separated from reality, we can talk about these as we're doing here in the class. It's a class, right, to study. So we're learning these ideas so that it's on the table and in our toolbox for us to have the opportunity to use it. That's how we teach, right? But to go preach to someone who's suffering that this is how they should look at it is the absolutely worst thing we could possibly do. Best thing is be an example of it. And when people ask you, how do you this and how do you that, you share your perspective. Okay. We will conclude here, everyone. To be resumed next Monday morning. Looking forward. All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Thank you.